All right. Hello. The live stream is up and running, and I'm hoping that you can all see and hear me. My apologies for this one running late, and I suppose two, the fact that we don't have Bryn or Jipper here today. You just got me this evening for unforeseen circumstances, but yeah. If you can hear me, um, then off we go. You're going to be getting me, not necessarily the boys tonight, because a couple of things have come up. But look, I suppose the first thing when I look at what's going on here and the fact that they're giving the Hurricanes midfield a crack outside the Hurricanes 9 and 10 is that it's still early in the year, and I know it's a Nations Championship, and I know that there is a Springboks tour coming, but they've got to try some things, right? And there is no losing in having Billy Proctor and Geordie Barrett together against Italy, especially. You've got to give them that crack, right? Bro, I almost gapped. Sorry. Um, yeah. Can you hear me coming through? Is it? Tell me in the tech if it all sounds all right. Because like I can't necessarily hear what you're doing. Um, yeah. Look, so I think that that's the key thing is that they're looking at that midfield and they've got to try all their options. The key difference there, obviously, for Billy Proctor, in my opinion, is that the previous setups way of playing with their midfield didn't offer necessarily a lot of room for them to take outside breaks and set up their wingers. And Billy Proctor will probably fit better under the new system, in my opinion. I think there's going to be more room out wide. He runs so well in those wide channels and he works so well outside of Geordie Barrett. He's so good at setting up his wingers or taking breaks himself. He's a smart player. I feel like under this new regime, Billy Proctor will give it a good crack. Yes, he's a different kind of player to what we've seen in recent times from Quinn Tupaia, who's maybe a touch more blockbusting, maybe a little bit more physical. Um, but he's a player that will work within the system. It's definitely a player that will work within the system. Billy Proctor is a good player, and I think he's going to set up his outsides really, really well for the All Blacks. So I think that's probably the main thing out of all of this. The rest of it seems relatively simple. I mean, you've got a basic nucleus: Cody Taylor, Sam Darry, Tupu Vai'i back, but obviously with some experience. Cam Roigard, Ruben Love, Damien McKenzie at fullback. So they stay consistent with the spine throughout the team. And then they've tweaked around the outside of it, which seems like a good idea early in the tenure of a new coaching setup. It also seems like, you know, they've got the talent around to move. Leroy Carter made a good fist of his first year in rugby. Good to give him another crack. Don't think they lose anything there. Obviously, having Will Jordan and Damien McKenzie working in that pendulum at the back, diffusing kicks, etc., along with Ruben Love dropping back, I think it's a good nucleus of people at the back front of the high ball. Some really solid players there. Seeing Luke Jacobson and Ardie Savia remain and bring in Wallace Atiti means that you're going to continue to have Luke Jacobson going in there and doing that dirty work, smashing through the rucks, making sure that they're getting on the front foot. That seems to make a lot of sense, making sure that clean ball is coming, that really quick ball that they managed to have in that first French test, which was opened up by the fact that they did such a good job around cleaning. And Luke Jacobs is very good at that. Ardie Savia is very, very good at that. I understand that Fehi is injured and Carter's been given a crack because of that. But all the same, he needed to have a go at some point, and they probably would have played him in the third week if it wasn't this coming week. So you might as well give those guys out in the wing a shot. They've got so much stuff there. The Simon Parker question that's just come in from Rory, that's a good question. I think Dave Rennie said that in the press conference today, look, he's been training the house down. I'd be surprised if you didn't see him get a crack in the third test match, maybe. They want to give him a bit of time, if not, certainly early in the Africa tour. They'll give him some time at some point. But I suppose you've only got so many loose forwards, and if you're trying to set up a nucleus around Jacobson and Savia with, either Lakai Satiti at 6, then you want to keep on giving that a crack. And maybe it's that, when you look, I suppose, at the work rates from the stats that we picked up and did a show on a few weeks before the selection, about which players do those bigger stats well, the back in game stats, the get off your feet and get going stats. Even though Wallace Atiti played a very limited number of minutes within the Super Rugby season, when he did play, his back in game stats were huge. Both sides of the ball. He is a busy, busy player and provides plenty of bash. So I think Parker will go well when he gets his chance, and certainly in those games in Africa leading into the test match, he's going to love, like Phil says down there, the physicality. He's going to love to drop some shoulders in there and get in. So maybe it's more just about how do you create that balance, probably of more renowned ball players in Satiti and Lakai. If you're going to have Ardi and Jacobson as your 7 and 8, maybe they prefer to have a player who's more renowned for his athleticism, maybe. Not saying that Parker isn't an athlete, but I think it's pretty obvious that Lakai and Satiti are kind of maybe a touch more X factor, and a touch more sort of within their ball carrying, from what I can tell. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see what they do with them, but I'm sure that there will be opportunities along the way. And a Parker, Jacobson, Xavier combination to be good, and we'll also get to see how it goes with Anton Segner. He brings, I suppose, that line-out option that maybe isn't there at the moment in the same way. And we know how busy he is. We know how good he is at the breakdown. We saw his carries improve out of sight this year. His ability to get over the gain line was really, really high. The number of tackles he makes is huge. So he seems like a guy who's going to do well in test footy. So hopefully he gets kind of more than 15 minutes. Hopefully they get on top of Italy relatively early and they're comfortable with giving him, half an hour of footy just to see how Anton Segner is going to go. Because he seems to be a player who's really built himself up in the last couple of years. I think there was a lot of chat about him for the previous years because I suppose of his roots and the fact that, it's unusual to see a German player come through, and he had excelled through the junior grades, but I don't think it was until this year that we truly saw him come of age. So, I think it's pretty solid. The front row, when you look at the front row, De Groot, Taylor, Lomax, I suppose in the last few years that might have been considered the A front row. Tamati Williams could have been in there, but that appears to be, the top dogs, doesn't it? De Groot had such a wonderful year in Super Rugby. Taylor obviously is the experienced man, and Lomax, despite the injuries and the lack of gameplay this year, I think he pretty much had a strong hold on that number 3 jersey. So good to see them go through. And then, Talkiaho also had a superb Super Rugby season. He deserved his chance. I know Armour's also had one, but if they're going to be rotating through, I did like the idea last year of having all the Hurricanes last week, having the Hurricanes all come through at the same time. But I'm sure that with a bit of time, these guys can work that out together as well. So yeah, it's an interesting thing. I do like Tossie and his ball carrying ability. He's a big man. It's a good team. It's a good team that they've got there. Josh Lord providing a little bit of X factor from lock. I like that they kept Derry there. Derry was just absolutely superb in that first game. He had more touches at first receiver than Ruben Love. They really used him as the linchpin in that forward pod, both for carrying and distribution. So he really showed how valuable he is. He had 1,000 rucks. He went really, really well, Sam Derry. I think that was an impressive outing from him. And I know he'd been good previously when he had played test footy, but to me, that was his best test outing so far. And he deserved to stay there. And Tupavai is probably the senior lock there. And after the last couple of years in test footy, we know how vital he's going to be in South Africa. That niggle, his ability to be right in their face. That's a really good combo for me. Derry and Tupavai. They're going to work really hard. And Phil's right, yeah. Derry was right up there for man of the match. Really, really good player. So, yeah, it looks pretty strong. Good to see Damien McKenzie get another run there. I know there's a lot of debate about what position he plays, but when he dropped back to fullback at the Chiefs, he looked really dangerous. He looked like he had time and space to inject himself. He can still play playmaker, but maybe more options for broken field running and chances to inject himself. So it's really a strong 15 from my view. It's hard to imagine after watching Italy last week and the travel that they've had that they're going to be in it. But geez, they can't get any worse than they were last week. Italy were just dreadful. They dropped so much ball. They just didn't look like the side that competed in the Six Nations and looked really good at times in the Six Nations at all. So you'd expect them to go maybe, get themselves together and bounce back to some degree, but I just can't see them sticking with an outfit that looks this strong. It's a really good side, and it's good to see Morby get his crack. Morby is a good player. He really deserves to get a really strong crack. So, yeah, score. Gosh, what does the weather look like? Give me a moment. Um, let's have let's have a look on the app and see what the weather looks like. If the weather is well, it didn't really matter for the Hurricanes, did it? Like the wind was awful, and they were still amazing in that final. But let's have a look. And that's another key thing, I suppose. Here is from 9 through 13, you got players who absolutely know how to handle those conditions. In Wellington, let's have a look. What does it say here for Wellington on the Met Service app? Of course, a few days out, you can never be sure whether it's going to be accurate. But mostly fine through the day, and then in the evening, it looks like it might get a little bit worse. Yeah. um, yeah. So I would imagine if I'm looking at the score, I wouldn't be happy if they didn't, get 35 to 40 points at least. Hopefully more than that on what was a pretty poor Italian outfit. I know when the All Blacks have been in Europe in recent years, they've actually struggled in that Italy game and not performed tremendously well. But I think it'd be good to see a, a better outing here, and based on all of those elements around travel and the fact that this team looks like it's got the basis for something that could be really good. Yeah. Young Swami says, I thought this would be the game we see Beauden Barrett. Today in the press conference, Dave Rennie said that he won't necessarily play everyone through these 3 tests. And I wonder whether Beauden could be the guy who doesn't see game time. They know what he can bring. And then when you look at the fact that they want to build this nucleus of Roygaard and Love and McKenzie at fullback uh, 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 against Ireland, you'd be pretty happy to see them have another crack, wouldn't you, and really test themselves against a side that, has caused us trouble over the last few years. Of course, if you had Beauden Barrett coming off the bench, we've seen him ice test matches, big test matches in recent years coming off the bench. He's always got criticism. I think because the expectations of him have always been so high after the way he started. But if you needed to have him on the bench as cover or some sort of injury came down, then you can't go wrong. That's pretty good depth, having a player as as well grounded in Test footy as Beauden Barrett is. But yeah, look, Ben Barrett might almost be a coach right now from Rory. I think you're not too far off. Yeah, he basically is, and from what I've heard about the way that he is in the Blues setup, apparently absolutely amazing. The feedback, his approach to analyzing the game, the way he pulls players aside, the way he can give them little bits of ideas and pull out of his experience and really give them a really good shot at understanding football. Apparently, he really is very, very good. Yeah. So, look, I think that Beauden Barrett could well be doing that over the next little while. Really being that senior guy. We've seen, I think it was Scott Brits within the Springboks setup during those 2 World Cups where he got very little game time, but they had an older guy there who was able to really, really put some knowledge in and help out with the culture and all of those bits and pieces. So I can only imagine that Beauden Barrett really is helping a lot with the tactical elements and really, helping Ruben Love and Damien McKenzie with insights into what he's seeing from what they're doing. He is a really smart guy. In fact, all of the Barretts are. I think one of the things that I take, having spent, a bit of time with all 3 of the Barretts who are in the test side, is that they're all very dedicated to rugby, and they cop a lot of grief in the media. I'm not sure why, because they've all had very good Test careers, but their dedication is huge. They're all very much schooled in the game. They watch the game. They are, code heads, and they really help other players, and help the team around them. They're quite dedicated. I think he's a really, really, really good person to have within that squad. Looking down more questions here. What have we got? I remember the days when live streams are actually being shut down. Um, what about Scotland's chances to beat the Springboks? I think slim to none is the option there. I haven't actually seen the Scottish side who they've named for this particular game, but the Boks have made a lot of changes. It's still a strong team going out for the Boks, but they have made a lot of changes. I imagine maybe last week's was slightly stronger as a side, but I just don't see the Scots being in it. The Boks are just wonderful at building that pressure game, especially on their home turf. I think Jacobson has found a role to play effectively at international level, which he didn't before. Yeah, I think that's probably fair enough. Like if you look at that Sam Cane style open side role, that real bruising, maybe get in, do the dirty work, clean out, big hits, dominant tackles, open up chances with your dominant tackles for turnovers for others. Um, the role of an open side, there's multiple ways of playing it, and it really just depends on the balance of your trio. Whether we're talking about Josh Cromfeld or Richie McCaw, the game has kind of changed in some ways for straight out fetchers. You can't make the tackle get to your feet and turn over the ball anymore. It just doesn't happen. So the fetcher has to be the second person to the breakdown. And, to some degree, everyone has to be that. Your midfielders, your loose, but we're seeing halfbacks get a lot of turnovers. We're seeing locks get a lot of turnovers, and yes, Duplessis Karifi is phenomenal at that. Artie Savia is very good at that as well. But I think when you look at the balance, you kind of don't necessarily have to think about the old traditional 6, 7, 8 roles. You've got to look at what are the balance of skill sets. I suppose the major question about balance of skill sets within the current loose forwards outside of Segner is that we might lack a little bit of height. So you're going to have to move within the line out quickly. You might have to throw quickly. You might go for some shorter line outs, and you're going to put a lot more on the two locks to take the ball. But I'm not sure that that's the end of the world. The variation doesn't have to come in the receivers. The variation can come in the shape of the line out, the numbers in the line out, the movement within the line out, all of those kind of things. And so to go back to Jacobson, I digress. If you are going to go for a Sam Cane style open side, a person who shifts bodies, both in the breakdown and in the tackle, and you want to create quick ball and make sure that you're physically dominant in that area to create it and give Cam Roigard all the chance to do the best he can, then it's hard to look past a person like Luke Jacobson to fill that particular kind of role. You could have a different 8 and a different 6 with that kind of ability, and then go, okay, well, we're going to go with the Duplessis Karifi to do the fetching role. But when you've got Artie Savia at 8, you've got a straight up fetcher there who has been, although he had a lot of rucks last week, I suppose, been given license in recent years, certainly since we switched back to 7, to pick and choose how he attacks that breakdown and really make good judgment calls on when he's going to go in for a turnover. And I think Jacobson puts him in that position. So, when you look at Jacobson and his concrete shoulders and what he does there, he really does give those other loosies a really good chance to do what they can. And in Artie's case, that's, get turnovers, get his hands on the ball. And in Wallace's case, it's, really play a big role in getting his hands on the ball and getting involved in that attacking side, and then really cause some distractions. And then it'll be interesting to see, as is mentioned down here with Segner, will they make Jacobson play 80 and bring Segner on at 6? Or will they go, okay, Segner, you can come on at 7, we'll give Jacobson a break, and we really want to see how you fit in that role. Personally, I'd like to see Segner have a crack at 7. I just felt after he went 7 from 6 in the Blues, he was just superb there. Again, it really does depend on your loose forward mix. Who's going to be doing the cleaning? Who's replacing that Jacobson role? Segner does hit plenty of rucks. He does make a lot of tackles. So he could work there, and I suppose he also gives them some line-out options afterwards. Yeah, Segner at 7, to me, I want to see him there. He could play 6. But again, it's really about who's playing next to him, what skill sets they bring to make it a complete loose forward trio. So yeah, it's an interesting setup, but look, I like it. I like what they've done. And yeah, the defense will be the top topic this week. Particularly making sure that there's not as much quick ball, and making sure that the Italian side, who during the Six Nations, their attacking structures were superb. They were slick. They were making breaks and moving the ball quickly, offloading well. They need to make sure that that doesn't happen. And that means slowing down the rucks. That means getting off the line quickly together on the inside and making sure that there's not the ability to hit the width the way that the French did very early and very effectively. You know, those defenders just can't keep on coming around the corner and coming around the corner and coming around the corner and playing catch up. Got to make some solid, hard hits, slow down the ball off the back of it, set your defensive line and get on top of them and force them to go to the kick, and not let them go wide, not let them attack. So that is going to be key. I'm sure that they'll be working on that all week. And I mean, one thing that Jipper says is that defensive systems take longer to embed than attacking systems. So hopefully with a little bit more time up their sleeves, I think it was 10 or 11 days they had in the first place to come into camp, get to know each other, get to build and understand what their approach to defense is. I suppose we'll find out more about what that's supposed to be when this game happens. I don't think that what we saw last week was what they were necessarily trying to achieve defensively. So we might know a little bit more about that system come the end of this week. But yeah, there are a lot of questions. What do we think about Preston? I was expecting him to come off the bench. I like his defensive reads on line breaks when he came on for the Crusaders. Yeah, I think he was picked as a bench player. I mean, he only had 250 odd minutes all year, playing off the bench all year, didn't have a start, which is quite rare within a Super Rugby setup. Usually there's a little bit of rotation there amongst the halfbacks to give someone a rest, but he didn't get that shot. But what he did was, when he got there, moved the ball really quickly, was really effective at getting to the rucks very, very fast and getting rid of the ball, which is why he's been selected within this team. Yeah, and Ratama, he didn't get a lot of time last week. I think as you embed those 9-10 combinations, you probably were looking to see how that went, especially if Ruben Love's first time up, maybe they wanted him to be more comfortable for a longer period of time by having more time on the field with Roygaard alongside him. So, I mean, we might see this week, if they get up nice and early, a little bit more time for Ratama. It's been interesting, I think, over the last couple of weeks. Certainly in my circles, I've heard a lot of people kind of raise their eyebrows about Ratama's selection. Through the first half of the Super Rugby season, when Xavier Rowe was certainly starting probably the majority of matches for the Chiefs, Ratama was really, really strong off the bench. And then towards the end of the year, he was getting the starts. So there's obviously something there that John O'Gibbs was seeing in his form. Even if, the public necessarily wasn't feeling exactly the same way after the selection. A lot of the comment sections and messages that were sent to me directly, I saw, if Roygaard gets injured, what are you going to do? Ratama needs game time. Well, yeah, you do. You need to give Ratama game time. You need to give him some starts, and you need to give Preston a chance off the bench at some point as well to show what he's got. Bryn really rates his kicking game off both feet. But also, I think just his speed to the breakdown, the number of breakdowns he gets to. And when we crunched the stats, it was a really interesting stat, kind of as an aside, that didn't necessarily prove the point of why he was selected, but he had more arrivals in the first three to breakdowns than any other halfback. What that means is it's not a stat about arriving in the breakdown, that's a stat for people who are joining the ruck. So he's often so fast to the ruck that he was then needed to clean because no one else was there. That's how quick he gets to the ruck, which I suppose is working against what he's there for. But that just gives you an example of how effective he is at reading the game, using his speed, and getting to the next ruck to make sure that he can distribute that ball fast. And at times, he was there too fast almost, because they needed him to secure the ball. So I think that kind of proves his point about if they're going to play fast, if they're going to play the way that they played last week, then he's your guy based on those numbers about the way that he arrives and the way that he distributes. The accuracy of his pass was phenomenal. Most of the Kiwi halfbacks had very accurate passing stats, but his passing stats were really strong. I think they were the strongest as far as, lack of errors off his pass. Pass completion rate, I think it's called. Really, really good. So rugby analyst Tupaya axed, perhaps Reen doesn't think he can play 13. Oh, no, I don't think it's got anything to do with that. It's just got to do with having a look at his options. He's blessed. Geordie Barrett, obviously superb 12, and Tupaya's had an amazing season at 12, but also grew up playing 13 and is a phenomenal 13 as well. And the two of them actually have combined over the last year very nicely with him at 13. I don't think it's anything to do with the way that Tupaya's going. It really is just giving him a chance. Just giving him a chance and seeing how these other ones go. Because, like I mentioned earlier, Billy Proctor probably wasn't given a fair crack given the previous game plan, which probably relied on their centres to be more about, blockbusting. And the same probably goes for Rico, where Rico was very good at getting over the gain line. Is that his best strength? I don't know. I think most New Zealanders remember that try against England, seeing him in the open, where he came around the outside of Caleb Clark and bolted to the corner, and think, man, if we could let Rico use his natural talents like that a little bit more. I felt like maybe he had been confined more to a carry role, that role that, Tupaya is just phenomenal at. But I don't think that role necessarily suited Billy Proctor. He's got more subtleties to his game. He's more of a classical centre in that way than, a blockbusting centre. And hopefully, I think Rennie just wants to see him have a crack. Did anyone see the 150 kilogram number 8 playing for Italy under 20 this week? No, but it is an interesting point when you talk about that. I think we had Brad Weber on the show 2 weeks ago, and he was saying that they have a different kind of bench system. I know you're talking about an Italian player, but in the French top 14. And so they've got a lot more locks who are really sturdy, big, powerful men who can't play 80 minutes. And, for instance, Ben Tamafuna at prop can get a couple of stints, because what happens is that you have a certain amount of people on the bench and you've got a certain number of interchanges like rugby league. So you can run a prop once in the first half, take him off, and then run him again in the second half. And so there's a lot more favor sometimes in Europe for some of those really, really big men. Whereas in New Zealand, you can't get away with being 150 kg. You're not going to keep up. One of your locks is expected to go for 80 minutes and the other one will come off. And you're going to have to trim down unless, that is 150 kg of just pure muscle, which I doubt it is it? I don't know. I didn't see the bloke. So Tupai combined with Geordie nicely against Australia, a team the All Blacks beat every time. Against France, South Africa, even Argentina, I can see him being exposed defensively. Look, I mean, possibly. I think he's good defensively. Seeing him as an outside centre, we'll have to wait and see. But I've never seen him make a bad read. So, I suppose we wait and see what happens there. Proctor's certainly very, very good in that role, as was Ioane as a defensive centre, like a superb defensive centre. Very few people got past him, and if they did, he caught them real quick. So yeah, yeah. Tapai's a ball crashing 12. He'll never start there with Geordie Barrett healthy. Um, yeah, but again, he grew up playing 13. He's very experienced at 13. He played 12 because that's what suited the Chiefs, and he's very, very good at both. But I think what we saw last year, um, it was really strong from him at 13, in my opinion, anyway. Yeah, the comparison to Bruce Robertson, I think, is good. He has that ability for an outside break. He runs good lines. He's good defensively by all accounts. He's a very good communicator. Sees things from the outside and communicates them back in. So yeah, that's Billy Proctor. So it's good to see him have a crack. Yeah, so we've got a bit of chat going on about these ginormous locks, and ginormous players. Yeah, it seems, yeah, maybe off the bench, it's good, but what happens the moment, as we said earlier, someone gets injured in Test footy. Can you have a bloke who doesn't have the fitness and the stamina, especially with it, if you're in an All Black system, maybe in some other systems, probably work in the South African system to some degree, but in an All Black system, how would they keep up with 80% lightning quick ball, 0 to 3 second rucks, and the way that they played last week? Goodness me, it's because it sounds like Dave Rennie's come in and said these players have got to get fitter, and it's not like they weren't fit before, but he needs them fitter to get off their feet, win the races, be in the place they need to be so this team wins. So, yeah. Why George Bauer over Ollie Norris? Ollie Norris has all the stats except the dominant tackles. Probably just not enough game time, I'd say. Ollie was injured for a big part of the Super Rugby season, and so probably didn't get enough game time. I don't think there's any doubting, considering the selection last year and the unfortunate injury he had, probably could have got more game time in Black last year. But I think you're right. Ollie probably, in my book, would have made the side if he had more time. But yeah, that didn't happen. So maybe they want to see a little bit more out of him. I would very much imagine that he's on the plane to South Africa. It's hard to think that he isn't going to be on the plane to South Africa. He'll definitely get a crack. So he's a really good player. George Bauer has played. Yeah, he's a utility prop. It's pretty handy, George. So he can play both sides. Yeah, geez, I've been talking to myself for some time now. I hope you guys are enjoying it. Is there anything else that you want to chat about? Let me know. And I'll try to cover it off. And look, next time we'll have all the boys on. Yeah, it's true. Norris did go with the Māori ABs. Yes, Phil, I am talking to you. I'm talking to you. It's a pity that there's no way of actually hearing you. Um, all I hear is the sound of my own voice. Is there any more word on Fee's contract? I heard he still isn't out of it, but his agent is working on that. Yeah, look, I'm imagining there's a price. There's a price to break a contract, and that's probably being very firmly negotiated. I can't imagine that that price is cheap either. Teams don't just want to give up players like that, especially a fledgling team like Red Bull. They thought that they had it good there. They thought they made a real good signing. Was Fiji ripped off by not being allowed to play home matches? That is, well, I suppose it's the way you look at it. The Fijian team or the Fijian nation needs to make sure that it can have grounds that are up to the standards required for international footy. Now, look, those stadiums worked just fine for Super Rugby. So maybe those standards need to be dropped just a bit, and maybe a little bit more understanding needs to be had to allow these teams to compete, because sure as I'll tell you, Wales weren't going to beat Fiji in Fiji, were they? And based on what we saw last week, with the way that they dominated almost every stat, and their attack was just Wales, I think, made 2 line breaks. Like, they just weren't that flash. They wouldn't have won that game, you know. And the other teams going down to Fiji, that's a difficult place to play. All of the Super Rugby players say it. It's a challenge to go there in humid, wet conditions sometimes and beat them. So, well, I think they're hard done by, and I think World Rugby needs to understand that if they really want to give these places a chance to win, they have to be given the chance to play at home as well. And I can understand when that was ruled out, why they decided to go to, for instance, to Wales, because you're more likely to sell tickets. Once it gets to that point, you're going, okay, how am I going to make my money? Because would people in a neutral country go and watch Fiji Wales? It's probably not that big of a draw card, is it? But yeah, you mentioned earlier that Ethan Blackett is high on your list in terms of what Rennie's looking for. Yeah, I hope that Ethan Blackett goes to South Africa. I think he's really good. Sorry, I've got a bit of a frog in my throat. His numbers, when we did the calculations, were really, really strong. Definitely those repeat numbers, but getting up and going again. His dominant tackle numbers were huge. The way that he dominates a breakdown when he hits it is huge. Look, I think he's the perfect player for a trip to South Africa. He's also highly experienced. He's been there before. If you need someone to step up across 6 and 7, yeah, I would take him. I was personally surprised he didn't make the squad. I know a lot of people say he's brittle and his body breaks, and do you really want to back that? But look, I think he's a solid player. Is he as good with ball in hand as Simon Parker? Yeah, it's hard to know. Yeah, both are quite physical. I like Blackadder's disregard for his body. I really do. But that is what it is. Dash Jameson, Parker, and Jacobson got manhandled in black jersey. Not sure how they've become these beast defenders all of a sudden. Look, I think I've spoken to Jerome Kano, and Jerome Kano, when I asked him, is there one player in New Zealand rugby that stands out to you as the kind of hitman that you were, he referred to Luke Jacobson, and he just said, mate, this guy hits so hard. You feel him in the rucks, you feel him in the tackles. Just, yeah. So no, I think the players on the field know where Luke Jacobson is, and maybe it's that Luke Jacobson is one of those guys who's maybe to some degree doing it in places that the television camera doesn't necessarily see. It's not necessarily seeing the cleans. It's not necessarily seeing the cleaner come through and go out the other side after being incredibly dominant. So I'm not sure people necessarily get to enjoy all of what Luke Jacobson does. He's more of maybe a coach's and a player's player in that regard than he is a fan's player because of it. But then we saw on the weekend, I mean, he smashed some people on the weekend. He absolutely smashed some people on the weekend, didn't he? So, yeah. Wales, Argentina stadiums half full. Was everyone at home watching the soccer? Probably. Probably. Let's not get into Argentina, Egypt, and the soccer, eh? Those Egypt remarks about whether Argentina were getting all the favors from FIFA, considering this World Cup and the favors the United States got, was kind of interesting. But I digress. I really don't watch that much football, but I enjoyed the storylines. Moore would confound SA more. I feel he has aggression that they are unaware of. Look, I don't think anyone's unaware of anyone these days, to be honest. There's so much video. Moore's been around a long time. They'll know what he's all about. There are people who are paid within these teams, analysts, to go through hours and hours of footage well in advance talking to Mike Blair about what he was doing in Japan, the amount of rugby he was watching, the amount of players he was watching, the stats that they use, and the way that they're across everything. Those things are available to everyone. We use OptaStats, and courtesy of Rugby Pass, and you can go all the way back to 2011 with the most granular statistics. Just the tiniest little things. We're talking about the kinds of passes that you made, whether they're short, whether they're long, what the result of that pass was, whether a line break was made off that pass. Every single action on a rugby field now is so detailed, and all of these teams have access to all of these stats. They pay the statistics providers to be all over that. Plus, they have all of the video and they have all of the people watching. There just is no way that anyone is new. Even if you're a debutant, they've got years of Anton Segner playing Super Rugby. They've got years of Josh Morby. Plenty of tries to look at from this year. They understand what he's about. They've got players who played in France who've watched Morby play over there. There's no one these days who isn't highly, highly analysed. So look, while they might not have faced Armour a lot, they know exactly who he is by the time you get there. So yeah, it's there's just too much information now. We had Graham Henry. Unfortunately, the technical side of the Graham Henry interview fell over. The Zoom call lost after about 3 minutes. We were going to have him on the show the other day. And Graham was talking about the difference in the data between now and 2011, and everything that they could access now in comparison. And when you're a selector, how much you can know now in comparison to how much you could know before. So look, I think that there's just so much information, and I imagine it would be relatively overwhelming for some people. Scott Barrett to number 8. Look, he's got the rig for it. Like he's certainly got the play. He can carry the ball and he can smash bodies. But he seems to be favoured as a lock for a reason. I imagine he pushes pretty strongly in the scrums. He's a big unit. I'm not sure if any of you have seen him with a shirt off. There's not an ounce of fat on him, but he's a monster, an absolute monster. He is a very, very fit and strong man. Stats don't reveal nuance. Like I say, when SA lost to New Zealand last year, they obviously delayed their selection because they couldn't figure out New Zealand's selection. Surprise wins matches. Oh, yeah. No, I mean, I know that Russie's big on naming teams on a Tuesday and laying his cards out, and maybe he's just playing some games there, but no, I don't believe that. That stats don't necessarily reveal nuance, but I think between the video analysis that they have and all of the games of Super Rugby that they have access to over years and years, particularly for Samoa, and then the stats as well, they know who he is. They can see whether he steps off his left or right foot. They can see the ball he likes to hand the ball, he likes to hold the ball in. They can see when he struggles at line-out time, whether he misses long, misses short, all of those kind of things. Those things are right there for them. So I don't think there's anywhere to hide these days. Maybe we should not broadcast Super Rugby so other countries don't know how guys are playing. It's an option. It's an option. It's a poor one, like as far as New Zealand Rugby's pockets are concerned, but it's an option. Another mini question for you, mate. Anyone else in Māori All Blacks that you might want to go to South Africa? Ollie Norris, Reihana, Spencer. Probably. I mean, I don't think that they need Reihana. They're going to have plenty of 10s. Spencer, they've probably got plenty of outside backs, lots of fullback and wing cover there. Ollie Norris. Oh, geez, I'd have to bring up the squad. I don't have it right in front of me. When we come up against the bomb squad, we need power. Yeah, I quite like that Hurricanes bench coming last week. I know it probably won't happen again because Lomax is, he's a certain starter, no doubt, but it was a powerful bench, and Samasoni is a powerful player coming off the bench as well. I think they've got some some good guys there. They've got a bit of squad depth. Right, stop picking giant loose forward combos. SA will win the arms race every time. Yeah, we're not really picking them, are we? We've got a relatively, well, short combo in comparison to Peter Steph to Toy, don't we? Not quite as tall as they are. Although, I mean, Sia and Jasper Visa aren't hugely tall, but Peter Steph certainly is a very, very big man, and Jasper Visa is a very powerful man. Scott is defensive juggernaut. You're talking about Scott Barrett. Yeah, he's a good player. Ollie Norris and Pasalio Tossi were perfect combination last year. Ollie Norris mobility complements Tossi, big power game. Yep. I'm sure if you're all reading the comments, you can see with what I'm laughing at. Why is Offa not picked over Bauer? Look, I mean, I don't know how Offa's body is. It's a bit of a miracle that Offa's back playing at all after the injury he had. Like, it's actually quite phenomenal that he got back, because that was a big injury to get through, especially for a prop coming in, at scrum time and having all that pressure go down your neck and back. Like, oof, that's something else. But look, I don't know whether I'm no expert on props. I'm not going to pretend I'm an expert on props. He didn't appear to be one of the form props to me, but I don't know. That's a question for Jim. We'll get that to him next time he's on. Crazy. England. How did England put 46 on the French A team? Are we talking about this 46-48 game during the Six Nations? Yeah. I think because they just broke the shackles off. They've been under so much pressure, and then they decided to run the ball and have a crack. And they've actually got good players. Like Ben Earl is one of the great ball carriers of world rugby, and they've got some really solid attacking players. Freeman out wide. The Smiths are good players, but man, their defense has turned to poo. And I suppose when they were man up and they were playing good territory against the South Africans, they got themselves back in there in that second 20. But no. I mean, at one point when they're on that winning streak, you're thinking, Jesus, England, a team that could be a real contender for the World Cup. But reading the English media at the moment about Borthwick and the chat about him being a control freak, and Felix Jones went to South Africa and he felt like he wasn't being heard in England, and just sounds like things aren't particularly well in that camp. Hopefully, it'd be interesting to see whether he makes it through to the next World Cup or whether they make a late change, but things don't look particularly positive there, do they? Moore and Taukei'aho are obviously competing for the same role. Who would you give the edge to if there was a World Cup final next week, and why? Or, look, I think that Taukei'aho, certainly within the Chiefs lineout, which was the most consistent and highest rating lineout in Super Rugby out of the New Zealand teams this year, is possibly the better lineout thrower. He works closely with Tupou Vaa'i and Josh Lord regularly. Based on that and the need to win your set piece, I would probably favour him. Yeah, he's not as much of a highlights reel guy, kind of out wide, as Armour, and Armour has had a sensational season. He is phenomenal at getting over the gain line, Taukei'aho, but I think that I would just base it on the fact that Chiefs lineout is so strong, and he appears to be a very solid, accurate thrower. And I think in Test football, you got to win all your set piece. And admittedly, the Hurricanes tended to have their lineout issues after he'd gone off, but look, I just think that Taukei'aho is solid. I probably favour him. And if Cody Taylor's your starting guy, then so be it. If Cody was injured, I would start Samasoni and bring a Asafo maybe off the bench, because you would give Samasoni more time in the middle. Yeah, so it's a good question how that would work. Who is the refs for this match this week? It's a very good question. Let's have a look and see what I can find. Will that be on Tribe? Maybe. New Zealand versus Italy lineups. Can't see. Someone Google it. Check it in the comments. Right. Luke Ramos. Okay. Right. So, when did Fee end up getting injured at training? I presume so. They didn't actually mention when he got injured, I don't think, at the press conference today. Yeah. Yeah. So, look, guys, I think I've got to go and get on with the rest of my evening and get prepared for tomorrow. But thank you very much for joining us. And look, we're going to be doing more of these YouTube lives with the boys more often. I suppose you got to remember that everyone's got jobs, so we can't just kind of do everything at a drop of a hat. But we'll try our best to get it done as much as we can. Certainly reaction pieces and get across everything for you and help you with your knowledge and your insights into what's going on with this All Blacks team as it develops over the next little while. So awesome. Thank you very much. We'll catch you soon.